The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by two fantastic co-hosts.
Lauren Ash.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about the latest game from I would say, short game royalty, Inkle. Inkle is one of our favorite developers of all time. If that name isn't familiar to you, it should be, because they've made many of our favorite games. Was it last year's Game of the Year, Overboard? Or was that a year before that? I lose track of time with everything.
2 years back, because Immortality was...
That's right, jeez. Okay.
80 Days also was a tie, if it wasn't... It was in the top 9 games of the 9 years. I got 80 Days in there, so...
Yeah. Multiple time Game of the Year short game award winner, Inkle. And even going back to some of their stuff that, came out before we started the show, but we've appreciated, like the, what are their like magic game books? Sorcery. Thank you. The sorcery games, there's multiple ones of those. And Heaven's Vault. Like I almost forgot to mention Heaven's Vault. What an incredible game. I think some of their games,
because we decided it was too long to win awards from us.
Yeah, honestly, it probably should have been our Game of the Year that year if we'd been more forgiving of its slightly too
It was
long
disqualified along with something else.
Yeah, I forget what it was.
Something else long
Outer
that year.
Wilds, maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember yeah. But Heaven's Vault, like sublime work of like game design and narrative and even just visually cool, like great work of genius.
I'm nervous to play Chance of Sinar this year because I like Heaven's Vault so much.
Oh, I know. Yeah, everything I've read about Chance of Sinar, it's like, oh, this sounds a lot like Heaven's Vault, and I loved Heaven's Vault. I just really want to play that. Laura, we still haven't made time for that. When are we going to make time to play Chance of Sinar together?
When we have 12 hours, and Justin wants to play too. So now 3 adults have to coordinate their schedules.
Is this a game actually multiplayer, or are we just
No, it's a Tower of Babel themed game that has decoding linguistics. And Justin wants to play with me, and Raygan wants to play with me. And so all 3 of us are going to, it's not multiplayer, but we're going to screen share and have a good time if we can get the schedules working.
Maybe during the holidays. That's my hope. But then again, like the holidays are a lot tougher these days. I've got 3 kids, and the holidays have turned from being a thing that I like look forward to, like, oh wow, I wonder what I'm going to get, and turned into something where I'm like, oh, I have to do things for all of these small humans in my life, and it's actually a lot of work.
So if listeners are like, why do you keep talking about this game that you want to cover and not covering it? That's why.
But that's also sort of why we're chatting around talking about this game, which is called A Highland Song. This is a game from Inkle that seemed, at least at first, like a big departure from them. So like when I first heard about this game, it has an art style that looked very Inkle to me. It looks beautiful, but it was pitched initially as like, it's a little hard to tell from the initial marketing of this game what it actually was. The things that they were really leaning into in the marketing was the platforming and the music, the rhythm game angle to this. I would argue that those are far less central to this game than things that are actually much more similar to other games that Inkle has made before. This is the most 80 Days game they have made since 80 Days, I would say. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, it's a little more conventional to Inkle's style and whole deal than I was expecting. I was expecting something a little bit less, less 80 Days, given that it's like, yeah, it's a music platformer. And it's like, oh, that sounds interesting from a group of people that I've never expected a music platformer from.
So that's the trailer. But in practice, the game is you are Moira, who's never seen the sea and gets this letter from her uncle Hamish that says, come meet me before Beltane at the lighthouse. The lighthouse is very far away and you have to cross a bunch of peaks, and also you don't have a map to get there. So you are traversing mountains in this kind of side scroller thing and trying to figure out how to keep crossing more and more mountains to eventually get to your destination, which is what makes it feels more akin to 80 Days. And like you have an end destination and you are trying to figure out your route, and you are picking up stuff along the way that may or may not continue there. So it's got all the traversal mechanics of it is nothing like the experience of playing 80 Days. 80 Days is a bunch of reading, and this is
it's
a bunch
map
of
mostly.
a map. Yeah, and this is much more side scrolling and like climbing and hiking. But it has the same structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The best analogy here is, I mean, Moira, as you know, is an anagram for Mario. So-
Shane. You've blown my
We are
mind.
drawing parallels here between Moira and the titular plumber. And so this is a game where you are, I mean, certainly more so than any other Inkle game, but the game's about speed and movement and rhythm in a way that those kinds of their other games are not. And it has these fantastic moments of racing down slopes accompanied by rhythmic, fun Scottish folk music that has these button presses where you're kind of leaping over obstacles and things. And actually that element of it does work pretty well for me. It's certainly a vibe. I love the Highlands, and I loved the music and ambiance and just the Scottishness of it all.
I don't want to bury the lead here too much. I have to start by saying I think that this game really fell flat for me. Like I've loved every other Inkle game I've ever played, and this feels like the first really big miss from them, in my opinion. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and we'll get into this in more detail as we talk about some of the different aspects of the game. But like the aspect Shane was talking about, the sort of whole vibes, the visuals of it, total success. It looks really beautiful. The animation is good. The central character, Moira, 15-year-old Scottish teenager going on the world's biggest hike. Vibes, love it. The music, very good. But structurally, it has the sort of 80 days, like I have a long journey to go on and many potential routes through that journey. And within those routes, many different sort of kind of mini story nodes, places with different stories happening that you might stumble across. In the same way that 80 Days was a giant map of the world with an enormous number of routes you could take to make it across the world in 80 days. And every city had its own little story. And depending on the order and everything that you went through them, you could encounter multiple different story threads that might be unconnected. They might kind of connect again later on or not. You might make it to the end of your journey by the end of 80 days or not. And that sort of structure is here. But of course, replace all of the map, choosing with this platforming mechanic. And where it initially started to fall down for me was the platforming mechanic. We can talk more about maybe the story stuff in a minute, but let's just talk specifically about the like physicality and like what are you doing with the platforming and running and everything in this game.
So the first thing that I kind of noticed about it, they do kind of start you off running down and away from Moira's house out through some fields, and I think kind of giving you that World 1-1 Super Moira Brothers experience.
You're just gonna keep making this joke, aren't you?
Well, you laughed the first time, so it's really your fault. So the platforming has a combination of just sort of run and jump, and for what it's worth, it's on a kind of very painterly line of terrain that is kind of beautifully illustrated into the game. And so
here's the first place that I found a challenge is that it is so painterly that it was very often difficult to tell what surfaces would behave in what ways, what can I climb up, etc.
I agree. That's kind of cool, like, because you do have, like, this is a game where stumbling is kind of a part of it, like stumbling and falling and all that. You've got a health meter, and if you're gonna do
just like Mario,
perfect platforming, like what's the point of having like a health meter? You know, you're gonna take some tumbles. Moira is gonna fall off of a cliff or two and get back up and keep running. But yeah, it's also you have a lot of interactive elements like climbing and spelunking and all sorts of things that you can do in the terrain as well. So it's not really a pure platformer. I don't know if that describes it.
I didn't jump that much. I mean, there's jumping in the
There are no
when you hit the
floating
rhythm
platforms.
sections. Well, when you hit the rhythm sections, you're usually on a straightaway or like you're going between areas, and it triggers like there's often a deer involved, and you hit shift and you go into the sprint mode and you go into the rhythm game. But outside of that, there's not a ton. I mean, towards the end of the game, when I had kind of gotten the basics and mechanics, I was jumping quite a lot in like my speed run of like, I know Moira is not as squishy as I've been treating her the whole game, and she can get pretty low and just rest overnight and get back to full health. So by the end, when I was in a hurry, Moira was, stubbing her toe quite a lot, but I didn't jump that much. A lot of it is, hold up to climb, hold down to climb down. It really depends on like how much you vibe with fake climbing. This is also something I've heard in the reviews of the game Jusant, the Game Pass game, of
Which I'm
like
super looking forward to checking out.
Yeah, but like in anything, like we talked about Dredge, like how much do you like the fishing mechanics? This is like how much do you like the climbing and hiking mechanics? For me, I vibed with it. And y'all had negative
I had
to
a
mid.
very negative experience with the climbing mechanic. First of all, like to describe the climbing mechanic, Laura kind of described it. You sort of, you have a two-dimensional, you're on a long journey. The journey is made up of a sort of like parallax set of like flat rows of mountains, right? So you have a mountain ridge that has its ups and downs, and you can see behind it additional mountain ridges receding off into the distance. And you're trying to explore each of the mountain ridges in order to find a way to kind of proceed on to the next one, because each of these mountain ridge silhouettes has a kind of a magical spot somewhere in it where you can hit the A button to move on. Sometimes those aren't very obvious. This was one of my frustrations. We'll talk about that. But
I think the mountains aren't monolithic. I mean, the mountain are a bunch of different planes. So you're going of like up a little bit, and then you might go to the right, and then you might have to hop to the left, and then you're on a different plane. And like you're kind of moving around and up the mountains in a funny way. It's not like you're going just straight up a line.
No.
Yeah. And that traversal mechanic is at times confusing and at times very, as I said, vibey. Like at times you kind of get into it, but at times you're like, where am I? I don't know where I am on this mountain.
Yeah, you can get very disoriented, especially if you die a lot, like I did, and it will just like respawn you in places where you don't know where you are. Sometimes she'll just like wake up and be like, "Where am I?" But like it has, so mechanically, it's a little bit inspired by the Breath of the Wild style climbing mechanic. You have a kind of a stamina, not exactly a stamina meter, but she has a certain amount of stamina that will eventually run out if you're trying to climb something particularly strenuous, unless you can stop and catch your breath. Similarly, you can run for a while, but eventually you'll stop and catch your breath. And it has surprisingly complex mechanics for things like obviously she has a health bar, like Shane mentioned, but you have to find places where you feel safe to stop and sleep in order to recover health. And for example, you can't recover health if you are out in the open and being rained on. So like you know, maybe resting beneath some trees would be fine if it's not raining, but on days where it is raining, then you have to find an enclosed place to stop and rest.
Or else your maximum health is reduced.
Yeah. There's a lot more like mechanics to this aspect of the game than I was expecting. That's not to say that's bad necessarily. I guess where this started really becoming the first area that started really deeply frustrating me about this game was that the kind of like structure here is like, okay, every ridge is a kind of a silhouette, and they're quite large, much larger than you can see even if you use the zoom out feature to like zoom to see the entire thing. So you can't see the whole thing at once. And like Laura said, you have no map. We'll talk about the maps mechanic in this. You have no overall map of the Scottish Highlands. You have a growing collection of tiny fragmentary maps that have no way of orienting, that you have to kind of match against the terrain by eye, which is also interesting, but all that is to say that if you just sort of want to say like, okay, I've kind of figured out this ridge, I want to move on to the next one. Your first task is I want to have to find the specific spot where it's okay to move on to the next ridge. And first of all, it was pretty late in the game until I realized that some of those, maybe all of them, have a little wooden spike in the ground.
Mm. Oh, yep. That would be very irritating. I found that first peak.
I was probably halfway through the game before I discovered that, those indicate a place where I can move on. So I couldn't, and they're very small. Even when I could see, when I knew what they were.
Shane, did you say you missed that too?
Yeah, I did not catch on to that.
They have the little.
They're just little. They're tiny, and they're very easy to miss if you're looking on the zoomed out view.
I guess. But when you pass them, they always have the white dot on them.
Yeah, they would light up. They
lit up, and then you would be able to walk over them.
There are lots of contextual controls in this game, things that will appear when you're standing right there. Yeah. And in some ways that is cool. Like, you'll find some items, you see a little light on the ground. It's like, hey, you found, a part of a dead animal. But in other places, like, you don't know when it's going to be triggered. And that really extends to all of the climbing mechanics where you see the option to do those controls. So to me, that part of the interface has a little bit of the issue that I typically have with pixel hunting style things. So that
you
that
can't
is something
see anything until you're standing on it. So like you might think, well, maybe that ridge over there is interesting, but it's like quite difficult to figure out how to get over there because there's a big, gorge in the way and like things like that. It's like I spent a long time in this game just like walking left to right, right to left, waiting for button prompts to appear on screen or retracing my steps, trying to figure out where was that button prompt from earlier. And also this is a little bit of maybe a me thing, but like at first this game doesn't do nearly any tutorializing. We usually praise that as a thing, but it wasn't initially clear to me that I was even supposed to be hunting for going to the higher ridge or the lower ridge or what have you. Like that, it seemed to me was like, okay, part of the landscape of the game, but it wasn't clear to me like, oh, that means I'm progressing, that I'm going to the higher ridge, right? So I would get to a place where it says, okay, you can go on to the higher ridge. It's like, well, I don't know if I want to go on to the higher ridge. I'm trying to get to the lighthouse, and that's by the sea. That's lower, right? Like where am I headed? It wasn't always immediately clear to me like where I was supposed to be going. And I know like that's kind of the point in a game that's all about exploration, but it was extremely unclear to me earlier in the game where I was supposed to be going. And I think I got quite annoyed with it. And by the time I kind of figured out, oh, okay, I get it now. I'm supposed to be going towards the lighthouse means continually finding these stakes in the ground and using those to progress on to the next ridge. But also under mysterious circumstances, sometimes you couldn't, and you had to do things with maps that were also very obscure at times. Like,
well, I think it's sounding like one of the things that I did that y'all may not have done as much as I would try to go up to the top, and because when you go to the top and you hit the top of the peak, you get to map match, and they get to zoom out, and you get to use your maps, and you get to find spots on the mountain. And always those spots are ways through. Like
yes. Yeah. So I figured that out, but and Laura, I don't mean to interrupt you. Like
I'm honestly trying to figure out where the disconnect is.
Yeah. No, the other part of the disconnect for me was like, yes, I did figure that out eventually too, but very often I didn't have a map for the area that I was at. So that didn't help. Right. So like I would have like 3 maps in my inventory. None of them would match up with, and by the way, the maps are actually a really clever bit about this that I quite like. As you're progressing through the areas, you'll find like an old boot. Inside it is a piece of rolled up paper. The paper is a torn travel brochure about the Scottish Highlands, that kind of thing.
And the new game plus is you restart with all your maps.
That would make things so much easier. Do they stay pinned to their figured out where they are? Or do you have to locate
you remember the names of the peaks and you remember the maps. So yes, Yes. I don't know if your spots are still marked, but you know, like this is the Eagle's Nest, right?
That's okay. That's great. And at least that, yeah. But like going through my one playthrough that was ended all too soon because of time, we like I laboriously climb up to the top of the hill, right? Get up there, and I would find nothing that would let me progress because none of my maps matched up to anything I could see, or if they did, they were matching up to a peak so far in the distance that it didn't have any bearing on my current situation, right? And so then, okay, I've got to go pour through this single ridge line again. Even though I've already explored it, got to go do it again, and finally, maybe find a place where I could progress through by pure happenstance. And that sucked. I hated it. I got really angry at this game.
That's fair. I think I would be like, oh, I climbed up the left side of this thing. I will now go down the right side. Like, basically, I actually have, this is the first time that having no natural compass might have helped me.
Maybe.
Because I am used to being lost in video games. I get lost in every video game. I'm not kidding. Like, I have no sense of direction in video games. So being lost and not exactly sure if I've been to a place before or going in a loop is like such familiar territory to me that I was like, okay, like that was 2 minutes and I did a big loop. Moving on. Like, it doesn't. So I'm not saying like I might be exaggerating how bad I am at it, but I don't think I didn't backtrack much, but I was able to be like, I've been on the right and we'll go left. And if I ended up doing a little loop-de-loop, I just chalked it up to bad sense of direction.
Yeah, I think what this all culminated in for me, and we'll talk about some of the other aspects of the game that I think were a little more successful for me in a minute, but like, sorry to continue harping on it, but just to give you a bit of an example, what this all sort of culminated in for me was that I'd been playing this game for several nights. I've a limited amount of time to play games, so really what that totaled up to was maybe 3.5 hours or something like that. But I got to a point, and Laura, sounded like you kind of recognized this particular ridge line or what have you, where there is a large dam. Mm-hmm. And I had a map of that dam. I was like, perfect, I can get through here. The map has a picture of the dam, and there's a hole through the dam. There's a tunnel. Mm-hmm. Got it. There's a tunnel through the dam. And it was obvious that I needed to go to the other side of the dam and scramble down the little ridge line to get to that tunnel, because the tunnel was on this sort of opposite bank of the of the dam, where there was a slope, sort of a V, right? I'm on the right side of that V. The dam is in between. There's a left side of the V, right? Going down the other side. So, okay. Figure out how to get across over to the dam, get across the dam, and then try to scramble down the ridge. But that ridge was a death trap. You can't get down that ridge. But I couldn't, because of the way that the thing is designed, you can't tell that you can't get down that ridge, because the ridge it's too steep and it has places where you will fall off and die. And I died dozens
fall off and
of
die
times.
There. I swear, I'm not gaslighting you. I just sailed down that ramp. I just skied down it and into the hole and was fine.
You didn't. I expect, because I'm very confident that's impossible. I think you went up from the bottom. I think you went down the right-hand side, went through a tunnel, and then came up the other side underneath it, rather than coming down from above. Because coming down from above that tunnel was impossible. I could tell you after an hour or more of trying.
I don't remember how
ridge.
I did it,
Good.
but
it
I just
matter.
remember I never
Good,
for me, I just. Oh, I can't. I'll go across this dam. I'll climb up it, get the peak bonus, and then I'll go in the hole. It was not it looked memorable experience.
It looked extremely oh, right, of course, I'll do it that way, right? It looked extremely looked like.
And I'm not gaslighting you. I'm just telling you that it was so not memorable. Me getting across the dam and into this hole was maybe a 30-second experience.
I know, MLG Laura.
Well, Raygan, she found the feather power up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a patch. We were playing a beta version. I don't know if it was I played it later than you, but that wasn't true. You played that after I beat the game, so that can't be right. So yeah. I don't know.
And once I finally figured out what I was doing wrong, which was incredibly non-obvious. I had to be going through a tunnel, a hidden tunnel that I didn't have a map for and didn't know was there, and had to approach it in a way that was.
It was just the big circle, right?
Right, the big circle. That was what I was trying to get to. Yeah. It was very obvious to get. That's where I needed to get to. It's just that trying to get to that, it looked like there was an obvious path to get to it, and the path kept killing me. And
Guys,
I was like, okay.
I have to tell you, this is scintillating radio.
Yes.
Our
Okay,
listeners are
but
gonna be
I
desperate to
probably
know
just were
whether you
like,
got
oh, that
consent to
path
take the
is
circle or not.
blocked, and I probably just like went around. Like I again, it's I didn't try. Like once the game said this is not a path, I usually just was like, cool, go the long way.
I could have sworn I was doing the right thing and it was wrong, and the right thing was like completely obscure and hidden. And then what really got to me, and this is a bug, so fair enough. You probably won't hit this. Laura didn't hit this, and honestly, this wasn't a huge deal. But like after an hour or maybe more of beating my head against this one screen, and every time I would die 2 or 3 times, it would say, okay, you're one day closer to Beltane. And it was the day after Beltane. I'd wasted like a week on this bridge, right? Like on this, I was so pissed. And I got to the little hole and I couldn't go. Like I walked up to it, it had a button prompt to go in. And like for whatever reason, I walked like a little ways away from it and walked back, and the button prompt was gone. And I was like, I will kill you, game. And then I quit out of the game. I loaded back in and I was able to get into it. So that was a bug. But like, I swear to God, this game wanted me dead. And so
For contrast, again, the person who liked the game, I died one time in the whole game. And that was because I was running too fast and I jumped off a cliff. I deserved to die.
The last time I died before I finished this, I was low on health. I started one of those running things, and I swear to God, Moira stubbed her toe and died. And
ladies and gentlemen of the audience, while Raygan is raging about this game, I feel it's very important for you to know that visually, it's about a little girl with a long
backpack and a ponytail,
with backpack and a little yellow jumper, walking through paintings and chasing deer through the grass. So
I know, that's why I felt like I must be such a dummy.
Scottish.
That's why I felt like such a dummy when I was getting frustrated with this whole thing.
No, when it like doesn't hit, it doesn't. And I will say one thing: if you're expecting this to have a very like this is also in the like Heaven's Vault. You're like walking through a bazaar, and like suddenly you just get a story that has nothing to do with anything playing. Like it has that vibe. Like,
yes, let's talk about these story things.
You're like when you're sailing through the Z or whatever they called it. It would play random storylets. So it has that vibe where there's not like a tight story. Like Morrow's just walking along and be like, one time my brother was in the hospital. And
oh, you remember when my dad told me a story about Queen Lizard Woman who was the strongest bear in the entire Scottish Highlands.
I can hear that theater degree, my boy. Go off.
I love it. But like they are generally related to the things you just picked up or the mountain ridge you're on, or like the hill you're on has specific stories about it. So they're not, but like I could see if you're not trekking that, which you only know if you've like gone up to the top of the peak and gotten the name of it. Like the stuff coheres.
That's the other thing is like I had a really hard time with that. It did not cohere for me. So I'd like to hear more about how it did for you. A brief kind of like where this went off the rails for me was like constantly the game is like giving you little bits of narration from your uncle who's just told you like, hey, meet me at the lighthouse, cryptic letter. But you have this whole history of cryptic letters from your uncle. And so playing in your head, I suppose, are all these like stories that your uncle has told you or written to you over the years. And you're either remembering them or they're, coming into your mind unbidden. And every
usually his stories usually come at night when you're sleeping.
Yeah, there's these things instead though where it's like a discovery. You're just like walking along randomly, and you'll hear a little bit about the gnomes that lived under this hill. They baked the best bread in the Scottish Highlands, and it's like discovery: the best bread in the Scottish Highlands was baked by the gnomes under the hill of steel, or something like that. And it's like a little achievement text that shows up at the top. And these things felt so like when I was I was not in the right headspace because I was frustrated with the game. And when these things would pop up, I was like, who fucking cares about the gnomes, man? Like, this doesn't have anything to do with anything that's happened to me in this game.
Raygan hates gnomes.
I love gnomes.
I know. I'm just teasing because to break up the the rage,
Sorry,
which is
I know.
totally justified. Normally that stuff, like for example, there's
I'd love to hear more about like I want to know how this is supposed to have worked, because for me it felt almost comical. Go ahead, please. Sorry, I didn't mean to be such a negative Nancy.
No. Again, so you're picking up things, and usually we go to the top of the peak. You are naming the peak, and you know enough about the stuff that around that area. But often, the lore are linked to the shortcuts, or they're linked to the secrets you find on that hill. For example, like you start hearing a lot of tales about the castle, and then you like go to the top, there's like of lion's teeth, and like why it's called lion's teeth, and then you go find like a statue of a lion, and you go up to the top and there's a ruin, and there's Roman markers, like and you find a Roman coin elsewhere on that mountain. So like there are things that are like it is implied like, like if you think about it, like this whole thing was a Roman settlement. So the story and the things you found and the settlements are all kind of linked. But it's very like earlier in the game, for example, like Eagle's Nest is a ski lodge. So you find like nicer things on that one. Like they're not as distinctive as like 80 Days, where they're cities around the world. But the tales are generally of this hill, the one you're currently on. And when you go back up to the top, or if you find the cave, or you find the woman bird watching, or like usually there's not every single one has a cohesive story, but more often, like 3 or 4 of them did, to the point that I was like, oh, if I had maybe spent more time on the other places, or I'd found the right artifact, this one would have also popped in. So they weren't. It felt kind of like I was quickly passing through some of these places, and the ones I spent more time in, I got the story of that mountain.
That is an experience I would have loved to have had. That sounds so great. For me, it just never amounted to a whole story.
I think you have to be like moving at a pace and looking at enough stuff and like collecting enough stuff to get that picture. Like it is a picture of fragments, and if you have 3 or 4, you might not get it. You need like 5 or 6 or 8 to make that story.
It's honestly right at the start of the story. And I saw an interview with one of the creators of this game, and he kind of conceptualized the game based on like a personal experience of getting lost in the Scottish Highlands when he and his like friends were, I don't know, 16 or whatever, and one of them got their first car and they drove off and wanted to pretend to be Aragorn, right? And they got lost when over hill after hill that looked the same. So, but in this same interview, which I think, it's a little freaky, in this same interview, he's kind of talking about the concept of the main character of Moira, and she's like young, she's like a kid. And I think he was saying something about how the nice thing about that was you can do these fairy tales where you talk about the gnomes under the hill that Raygan seemed to like so much. And
I made those up to be clear. I invented
you do
extraordinary
right.
Gnomes under the hill.
Yes, but there are. It's all about like there's some mythological elements in there. Giants' bridges and whatnot. But to me, like right at the start, you get this like little dialogue with the mom as you're sitting. You like climb out your window and run away. And from the very beginning, I was very effectively worried for this child. I was like, I am. You've put me in charge of helping this little girl navigate through this massive expanse of completely
empty
with
no hat.
wilderness. Yeah, with nothing, no food. And
she went on a presumably multi-day journey where she brought a thing of cheese, like nothing. She's got a tiny backpack.
No, she brought the backpack to pick up all the trash she finds along the way. So
she's living off bilberries.
Yeah, I was immediately terrified for this girl.
You thought it was a survival game?
I thought I am walking this child off into the mists to starve to death.
Did y'all run into the birdwatcher woman?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So this at some point in this game, you run into a birdwatcher woman who's like, I should take you home. And you're like, nah, man, I'm cool. And you just walk away. I think that birdwatcher woman if I were them, I would have just been like, no, you're coming home with me, or have a bagel. Like,
Yes.
I would have stopped Moira.
Yeah, I love that scene because she just sort of like wanders up to this woman who's clearly just like an out of towner here to like look at birds, and she's like, "Oi, slept in your cottage. Is this your crowbar? Bye." You know, like, wandered on.
The woman says, the man upstairs would have me take you home, and then you're like, I don't believe in God. Bye.
Yeah. Like I liked the character quite a lot, and I agree, Shane. Like but like for me, my concern for her evaporated as I realized, oh, I'm killing this girl over and over. This poor woman, like. I just walked her off 100 cliffs in this, trying to figure out. You know what we haven't talked about yet? What we should talk in more detail about the thing that's in all the trailers, which is the music running mechanic.
Sure.
So good. I liked that a lot.
I liked the music a lot. The
Love
music
the
that they
music.
chose for this was lovely. I would have liked the like actual mechanics. Like as a rhythm game, it's pretty basic, which is fine.
Mhm.
But it's extremely basic. And because you're actually like, it doesn't want to like start you over. So if you fail, you just sort of like trip and the song stops, and then you kind of pick up where you left off if you want to like run some more.
And you can change the settings to have a no fail state for that.
Yeah, that's true. And you can also change. There's a setting to change. There's just two buttons in the rhythm mode. There's like a jump button and a different jump button. And you there's even an option to change it so that it only ever uses one button, which might have been.
You could also turn off the weather. It's the Highlands.
I did that at one point.
No,
I was getting
I just thought it was a funny option. Like, I completely understand doing it. It's just a very funny option.
At one point I was getting so pissed off that it was like constantly raining on me, and like I knew exactly where I needed to go, but I had spent like more than an in-game day trying to figure out how to get up this hill that was mostly like slippery, right? And I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going into the options. I'm turning off the rain.
I stay at an accessibility setting, so I can. Everybody who wants to use them to make the game more fun, I am here for it.
Yeah, totally.
Even if it doesn't make it more fun. Sorry, Raygan.
Yeah.
One thing that like might be holding it back a little bit is this isn't video game music. Like, this is folk music. And when you think about music for rhythm games, obviously there's rock band and stuff like that, but this music doesn't necessarily like lend itself to like tap A to hit the
It usually would be like the space is the bottom note of the chord, and the up button is it's either the so or the mi, depending on the song. Like so when you were hitting them, but I'm getting very music theory in it, but like they felt you were playing two notes of the song is what it felt like.
Yeah. It was, and that's an interesting thing. Like it's kind of like, it just was very different from what I was expecting out of a rhythm game, I liked the bits where there was a deer racing.
It was like a very basic take on a rhythm game that like there's a whole genre of like rhythm platformers. Like, I feel like this developer, I don't know to what degree they were like looking at prior art here and like taking inspiration, but it didn't feel like much to me. It felt like they were kind of like, we can invent rhythm platforming, and like, but they never looked at something like Muse Dash or something, right? Like,
this just felt like a way to like make the euphoria of like, finally I've hit a pace on my hike, or I'm running and I'm having fun, and like heighten it. Like, it didn't feel like it was a rhythm game in itself. It just felt like a heightened movement mechanic.
I was surprised how little of it there was in this, given that it was sort of like, the game is called
such a huge
Highland
part of the
Song.
trailers. Yeah.
Like, the title is such and such song, and the trailer, it's all over the trailers, the like music rhythm game aspect. And honestly, like, I played this game, I would have to double check my Steam clock, probably more than 5 hours.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And maybe somewhere between 3 and 5. Like, don't quote me. I think I'd have to double check, but certainly more than 3 hours, somewhat less than 5, but I think closer to 5. And I only think I actually did that running, jumping mechanic 4 or maybe 5 times, like less than once an hour for me, like way less than I was expecting to do it in this game.
Well,
And
you spent the rest of that
each time
hour
I did it
falling
was
in a
very
hole.
short. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's paced that it's between peaks. So like it should, like if you are stuck on a
Really?
mountain.
You think there was one between every peak, or because
If you're not like crawling through a cave or out a mountain, there were mostly between peaks or right before, like they were big movements. Like they're designed to like cover flatland. So a lot of the times it was between peaks or like between major set pieces.
okay,
Like you
I don't know,
finished it, then you were at a new spot.
if that makes sense, but that wasn't sort of how it felt for me. I don't know whether it was just because I was running into every roadblock, but it felt so random to me. Like it'd be like things like I would go across this like cool, like, oh yes, I'm going to run at full speed, I'm going to do the whole like rhythm jumping thing, chasing the deer, playing the song, etc. And I would get to the other side, because it's always like left to right or right to left. I'd get to the other side of the plains or whatever and realize, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Or at least I don't think I'm supposed to be here. There's nothing to do here. What am I supposed to do? And then I would just do it again to get back. It just sort of felt like,
oh, really? I've never.
Yeah.
I always saw those as forward progress. Like I always was like, oh, I've hit a shift. I've hit a musical interlude. I must be doing something right. Like every time I thought that's what
it always felt like I was doing something right. But then I'd get to the end of it and I was like, oh, this is. I mean, maybe I just didn't know I'd done something right, but like, yeah, there were at least two times in this game where I like did the thing and realized, oh, well, better do it again and go back, And that was like,
wow, I didn't even know you could do them in reverse.
Yeah, you can. It plays the same song.
I just kept going the direction it was pointing me in every time.
It says kill your parents if you play it backwards.
I'm now realizing like how frustrating this is, because I'm like you're backtracking, you're dying, you're like I feel like
that could go wrong for somebody in this game did to me, it seems.
No, and I just feel like it there's some discoverability stuff of like it shouldn't. I think even though I had a good time with this game, I think the discoverability, the fact that it feels like chance that I had a great game. Like the more we're talking, the more it feels like chance that I had a really good experience.
I don't know.
I'm hoping they can protect but it doesn't sound like that different of a change. Like telegraphing stuff more. Like it doesn't sound like it's.
I think if there had been a screen at the beginning of this game that said, here's how you play a Highland song. Look for the posts. When you see a post, you can probably go to the next ridge line. Look for objects. Your objects will give you elements of stories that will build to a larger story on each peak. Like, I know that's dumb, right? I know you don't need.
My uncle once told me about all the posts.
But putting a signpost early in the game where she goes, "Oh, signpost, these mark bridges" or something. Yeah,
literally, yes. Like if they done like a little more of that early on, maybe I would have had more forward momentum. Especially early in the game when I was really spinning my wheels.
I did at one point get lost in a cavern, and I was like, I don't want to find my way out of this, and I just around 4 minutes before I went into that cavern and just went up instead.
Oh man, the caverns, man. There was a bit in this where like I was like, I didn't know this was a horror game. I'm like on my belly crawling through like a tiny tight cavern, and Moira's like, is that blood? And I'm like,
what?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
I didn't get that.
You didn't get into the blood cave? It was all over the place, man.
The eaten by a grue ending.
I almost got the eaten by a grue ending.
I did not go to a blood cave, although I was seriously trying to piece together the all the secret notes between the couple.
I don't think I got any of that, or maybe I got one. I saw some notes that I thought were pretty mysterious. Maybe I
like
did get
meet
one
me in the blood, like meet me here. I got like 4 or 5 of those by the end of the game, and
I think I got one of those. It didn't. I just thought it was sort of like one of the other maps.
Well, you can keep getting those and get more about their relationship, which may or may not involve the ending.
Okay, I wonder. We should probably do a spoiler break. I will guarantee you, like, this is an Inkle game. I'm gonna probably play this again in a year and love it, because
I don't think maybe you shouldn't do that, Raygan.
I don't know.
You're gonna have trauma
now with the
it's not a tight story,
right?
Again, it's a loose story, but it's got a lot of like vibing with the environment and hearing some stories about the Scottish Highlands, and then like bits of lore drop.
Yeah.
So
can I just say one other thing, like on the topic of the story, and maybe you guys will feel differently about this, like because this was such a like this is the most 80 Days game that they've done since 80 Days. I was constantly comparing its approach to story to 80 Days, and you know, years after the fact, what stands out to me about 80 Days was the unique world building of it, the unique, like this was it was a twist on a world that was like, it was like an anti-colonialist take on a whole genre of adventure fiction, right? And that was something that was like kind of earth-shattering at the time. It was like, it felt really fresh. Even today, it feels really fresh, the whole vibe of 80 Days. And this feels much more rooted in like traditional storytelling of the Scottish Highlands. And it didn't seem like it was, I mean, I'm sure there's things that are like the unique twist of the specific authors in this case. I don't know enough about the story of the stories of the Scottish Highlands to know what is twist and unique individual take and what is just like straight mythology or inspired straight by mythology, right? But this just, to me, just sort of felt like very much of its, of the Scottish Highlands specifically, and rooted in that place, and not like a twist with something to say. Yes. Maybe it's because I missed it.
No, I don't. Like, it is straightforward.
Yeah, and it's and that I think is a weakness here. It's so straightforward that like if you're not deeply interested in, and like I'm okay. I'm
listen up, Scotland. Raygan doesn't like your world building.
True, like it's freaking Scotland. It's like it's Scotland, man. It's like it's a bunch of white people in hills. Like, come on, there was a battle. White people killed other white people 600 years ago, and they've been resenting each other ever since on the same hills, and like blah blah blah. Like it's just it was like so much less engaging on a story level, even when it was able to tell me a story, than something like 80 Days. And like I know it's not fair to compare it to 80 Days, which is I think one of the greatest narrative things we've ever talked about on the show, maybe one of the greatest narrative games of all time. But like, it's hard not to compare it when it is doing the same structure from the same developers. I know there have been changes in personnel. I know Magna Janth has moved on from Inkle and is no longer working there. I don't know I don't know that much about the team that specifically made a Highland Song. Apart from that, they're all part of this developer that I love. But it was just really uninspiring to me from a storytelling perspective, apart from just all of the other issues that I had.
So I will say that for listeners who are still like, who wins, good time or bad time?
Sorry,
I will.
Yes.
No. Again, you're
I know,
like totally
I
valid.
I do feel weird when I like really hate a game and then talk about it.
We don't normally.
It's not what I do.
Well, listeners, we don't have a lot of practice covering, because if everybody bounces off a game, we usually just skip it. And this was different because I was like, I thought it was a nice chill time, so we thought this would be an interesting.
And it's hard to not talk about the next game from Inkle on this program, right? Like,
true. I mean, you covered that time loopy game from Annapurna that I
12 minutes. This is, I will say, better game than 12 minutes.
So on their site, when they're listing stuff about the game, they put it's platforming, survival, navigation, and then narrative, and then rhythm runs, and I think that is a bit of the ranked priority in this game. Platforming, survival, and navigation are bigger parts of the game than the narrative.
I think our listeners are really well informed at this point, and they will, at this point in the podcast, have a very good idea whether they are like Laura, who enjoyed the narrative and I think was actually good at the game.
It's fine.
Or if you're going to be...
or notorious shit at games old man Raygan.
Well, normally, it's not just really just that, change, because normally I'm the challenger who's like, Laura can't shoot guns. I can't shoot guns.
Other listeners might share in Raygan's hatred of the Scotch. Consider them to be a race of kilt-wearing, knobby-kneed, pale...
We're gonna get
people
banned
with
from
terrible
iTunes. You keep
Highland,
talking.
terrible vistas that no one would want to explore or get lost
Those
in.
ginger degenerates crawling around on their filthy hills.
By the way,
Okay,
this
we
game
must
apparently has
stop.
100 map fragments in it.
What?
Yeah.
What?
There's 100 different map fragments in this game.
That is impossible. I think I saw less than 15. Maybe 20. Max.
It's 80 Days style, or like I'm sure there's just a million.
I mean, I knew it was going to be like, I knew this was one of those like goes wide kind of things. Yeah, and 80 Days, yeah, that's true. 80 Days had just like an unbelievable spread of potential routes and whatnot. But that, 100. I am surprised at that number. I'm very surprised. I know there is a kind of a big branching, like there's a really big branch right at the beginning of the game where you're sort of like, which way do I go around the loch, right? And it's like almost sort of like you're going to get two totally different versions of the game based on which side of the loch do you go on. But like, I don't know. It's a lot of branches.
Yeah. The way they describe it is what you will find will depend on where you go. The narrative is not branching, but weaving, a mesh of history, mythology, and family secrets depending on where you go.
Okay.
See, this podcast has left me much more interested in finishing the game than when I started. Not only because Raygan didn't like it,
And if listeners, we played the early game. If you figure out after you turn on the ski lift how to get on the ski lift, I was like, peace, cannot figure out how to get on this chair. Bye. Because I could not find the entrance to the ski lift, and I just decided to run away because I was done. So if you'll figure out how to get on the ski lift, tell me. Yeah, Raygan's like, what ski lift?
There's a ski lift? Yeah.
At Eagle's Nest, you can go turn on the ski lift.
Oh, I saw that in the distance. I don't think I ever got there. Yeah. So we'll do a quick spoiler break at the very end. We're going to do some what's making us happy. I know we're getting a little long on the episode here, but I think we need a little bit of that vibe for to close this out. So we'll do a little bit of what's making us happy. We will do a little bit of spoiler break at the end, just to, for folks who might be interested in sticking around for that. I did not get to the end of this game for all the reasons stated. I barely got past the infernal dam. But I know Laura did reach the unending. Managed to get to the lighthouse by Beltane.
Yes, 7 p.m.
I was still sitting with me thumb up me arse on Beltane. But I would love to hear what happened to you at the ending. Because I probably won't play this for a while. So yeah, stick around for that if you'd like.
That
but
seems
before
healthy.
we do, here's some what's making us happy this week. Laura, what's making you happy this week? Apart from just demolishing me at the highly competitive game of a Highland Song.
Not a highly competitive one. And I will say that I am in DC right now for work, and I went out with a friend to a southern bar, and they had milk punch on the menu, which I have not had in a long time. Milk punch is normally a brandy cocktail, but this one was made with bourbon and rum, and it's like it is a very, very old cocktail, like I think almost like 1700s. Like it's like Ben Franklin mentioned it, so of course they're serving it in DC. But eggnog's a type of milk punch. But if you have a nice fancy cocktail bar version, it's going to be exponentially nicer. It's lovely. It's like not too sweet, not too boozy. There's a lot of hidden booze in it. But I'm going to say that drinking old cocktails in a old bar in DC is making me very happy. And I'm super psyched to have the milk punch. Maybe I'll have another one later in the week if work goes well.
I absolutely adore that. I have looked at recipes for those and just kind of eyed them with my
They seem
home
difficult to
cocktail bar.
make because you have to like carefully mix the ingredients in a way that the milk goes with it. But this was almost clear. Like it was super clarified and it was beautiful.
Yeah, there's
I've
a
never
whole
really attempted to
process
make
where
a
they like
based cocktail.
It's a clarified milk punch.
Exactly.
So they strain out the milk solids and they just leave you with all the like the creaminess of milk, but it's completely clear. It is magic.
It's very strange stuff.
Somehow it was the cheapest cocktail on the menu, and I was like, this is hard to make. I guess they must make it in large batches. So
Well, and you compare it to a nog. I love an eggnog, and I try to limit myself to only guzzling eggnog once a year, and it's coming. That's what I'm partially excited about that.
Man, I love an eggnog.
if you want to do a clarified one just for funsies and spend another like year on it, I like a Milk Watch spirit, and I will not deal with it at my house. So, yeah.
I haven't made any good cocktails lately. I need to go on a liquor store run and like restock my bar, because every
Do
now
it
and
before
like,
I come visit you.
oh, I will. Good point. Yeah, my liquor cabinet tends to sort of like dwindle and dwindle until I like finally am like making cocktails out of like, you know, Kahlua and like salt water or something. You know, I'm like really scraping the bottom of the barrel right now.
And for non-drinkers, I'll also say I've been enjoying London Fogs, which are basically like Earl Grey with vanilla milk. They're lovely. That's my decaf drink of choice in the afternoon. Has been a London Fog.
I don't think I've ever made a London Fog. I'll add it to my list. I have a much less cultured what's making me happy this week, but I'll just bring it up. I've actually literally talked about this exact thing on the podcast before, but I think it's been long enough. I recently caught up on a manga that I love, and I will recommend it to everyone. And that is A Bride's Story by Kaoru Mori. A Bride's Story is a manga. So I think Mori is one of the best comics artists working today, and you should absolutely seek these out and try to check them out. To explain, they're I'm going to try to do this without referencing the Wikipedia. So if I get a detail about the like specific historical time period wrong, please forgive me. This is a series of this is a manga series that's set in the sort of Silk Road era. It's set in Central Asia, in what would be modern day Uzbekistan, I think, and the area surrounding it. And it's also like mostly sort of a slice of life kind of thing. The overall premise, the beginning of the manga, at least, it goes pretty broad after this, but the beginning of the manga is about this is a period when there was a sort of a tension between the people who lived in towns and settlements and the people who were sort of the nomadic, horse clans of the steppe, right? And the beginning of the story is about an arranged marriage between an older woman, she's 20, from a horse clan, and a young man, he's literally 12, from the towns. And there's a sort of a political advantage or what have you in this marriage. They get married, and it's them getting to know each other. But it becomes this sort of like, at first it seems to just sort of become this like little like fish out of water, domestic story about this, woman who can shoot a bow and ride a horse and all these, amazing things integrating into this settled town and the family there. But as the story slowly progresses, it just introduces lots and lots of characters. There's a European man who's exploring the area, just sort of like writing about the sort of what you'd call like what do you call him? He sort of a naturalist, I guess, but he's sort of mostly just documenting the culture there. Lots of weddings, lots of marriages, lots of just sort of quiet domestic stories. All in the background is the threat of the Russians invading, because this is a period where Russia was looking for ports that didn't thaw in the winter and was coming farther and farther into this area with their armies. So it's actually kind of interesting and dramatic stories, despite being like the sort of prototypical like slow slice of life manga where they'll take like an entire chapter to show like somebody's 3-year-old cousin wandering off to meet the local wood carver who shows him how to carve wood for 5 pages, and then spends the following 3 pages of him showing off his crappy wood carving that he made to all of his aunts and uncles. Like, that's a whole chapter of this, right? So like all of these sort of different levels, lots of different characters. It's been going for quite a lot of volumes now. I think the most recent volume was volume 12. It comes out pretty slowly. Mostly because the art is ungodly detailed. This is a period where everybody's main occupation was doing embroidery, and they just embroidered the shit out of everything they had. And Mori just spends an unreal amount of time illustrating every stitch in every embroidered garment and tent flap and cushion that everyone in this series has. So all that is to say, like, even if you don't read manga, I think A Bride Story is one of the best pieces of comic art ever made. I think it's incredible. And you should go and check and see if you can get it from your public library, or just buy it if you want, man. Like, it's great. It's one of the best things that I just love it. And if you're worried about a story about a 12-year-old and a 20-year-old getting married, potentially being gross, it's mostly not. Don't worry, it's not gross. It's really good. So I would strongly recommend people check out the book. It's great, and there have been like 12 volumes now. And every time I like to forget that it exists for like 6 to 12 months and then go and catch up. That's the ideal way to interact with this. So go check it out. Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I was really enjoying a game I tried to get us to play for the podcast, but I think I don't know if we're ever going to actually do it. So I'll go ahead and just make it a what's making me happy. And that is Super Moira Brothers Wonder. And
It's a callback.
The game came out, I want to say, a couple of months ago now, as we've had a little time with it. And the discourse around that game originally was kind of like, hey, this is amazing. It's a new 2D Mario game. It's been like my whole lifetime. We haven't had one. I've wanted another one of these. And on top of that, it's visually fantastic. It is a huge improvement over the kinds of 2D Mario that we were getting on some recent consoles, mostly handhelds, especially because it matches the original art beautifully for Moira, and it has and Toad and Toadette and Yoshi and all the gang. The thing that I think I heard the most in reviews was like, hey, this game's kind of easy, right? And my experience playing the game is great, because it's not at all easy, because I'm playing it with a 6-year-old who is still struggling with the game. And they've done some really clever things with accessibility for the game. Like they added in Yoshi as a playable character, and also the inexplicable creature Nabbit is in the game. But when you have someone who can play as Yoshi, Mario can still ride on Yoshi. Yoshi has a little bit of extra jump, but also they've made Yoshi and Nabbit immune to enemy damage. Basically, they don't die from enemy damage. So it's that perfect like little brother player character that you get with like Tails in platformers. And they've made it pretty friendly to dying and stuff. You turn into a little ghost and you can fly back to your co-op partner and respawn. So I'm honestly just really, really loving the game. It's beautiful. It's fun. It's super inventive. The Wonder Flower thing. Neither of you guys have played this game yet, right?
No.
Okay.
Not
So
yet.
do you know that there's this concept of these Wonder Flowers? That's the main hook for the new game. Basically, somewhere kind of hidden in the level somewhere will be a glowing flower, and when you get it, it changes the level up in some creative way. And every single one of them, or almost every single one of them, is different, or a variation. So things like all of a sudden the piranha plants start singing in a chorus, or the game goes slow-mo or super fast, or The gravity flips, and now it's a top-down game. It's all kinds of weird little moments to get the kind of extra bonus from this. So I love that exploration and secrets. That's kind of core to really 2D platformers to me. And it is a little bit easy in that, like, by having the flower in every level and that leading you to the secret, like you get one reward seed for finishing the level, and then you get another one for finding the wonder flower and like doing some usually pretty straightforward challenge from that. So I guess my overall takeaway is, like, this is a game that I don't know what it's really like to play it solo. But I am playing a lot of it 3-player couch co-op, and there's not a whole lot of Mario style platformers, let alone actual Mario platformers, that play well with the entire family sitting in front of the TV, like 3-player. So for that experience alone, I've got to recommend it. That's making me really happy. My son is absolutely loving being Yoshi. Like, he started off being Luigi because he loves being Luigi in most of these things. But once he realized Yoshi couldn't die and he could carry me around instead of me literally picking him up and carrying him through the entire game, like I did with Super Mario 3D World, now he's really into it. So
I have a couple of questions about this, because I've thought about playing it in the same way. Like, I'm currently playing some Mario Kart with my kids, but I know that I was aware that, like, the kind of little brother character, the unkillable characters are Yoshi and Nabbit, and that from what I've read, you can't do that with Princess Peach.
Right.
My daughter is not going to want to play a game where she can't be a Princess Peach. So is it right? Like, there's no way to get like invulnerable Princess Peach or anything like that?
The version of invulnerable Princess Peach that you would have is her playing with you, because the game becomes very hard to like fully lose when you are playing with an adult who's not jumping down every pit.
Gotcha. Okay. And other important question. Can you pick the color of the Yoshi? Because
you actually
my son
can.
only wants to play as blue Yoshi.
Yes, my son also is a blue Yoshi enjoyer. So yes, you can choose the color of the Yoshi.
Whew. Okay.
Yeah. This is one I'm looking forward to. I am not allowed to buy this. I mean, I can, but I'm not supposed to buy it until I play more Tears of the Kingdom, which I abandoned to play games for the short game. So very fair.
The curse of the podcast.
Did I tell you all I finished Tears of the Kingdom?
No, congratulations.
No.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great ending. It was a little while ago. But yeah, I realized it was I was like, I probably have enough weapons and healing items to like brute force my way through Ganondorf, and sure enough. But yeah, great ending. Really cinematic, fantastic sequence. I love this is spoilers here for the end of Tears of the Kingdom. I love a boss fight against a character who just sort of turns around and uses your own moves against you, right? And that's kind of the first big fight with Ganondorf. Is first off, he's like, he's basically using Link's moveset with a variety of weapons and doing the flurry rush against you. I think the only enemy that does that. And that is fantastic. He's a very tough as nails boss. I went in with like a absolutely full inventory full of like healing items and buffing. Link was eating a 3-course meal every 15 seconds in this fight. And then on top of that, there's this incredible sky sequence with Ganondorf having turned into a evil darkness dragon, and the light dragon, who, further spoilers, is Zelda, and you're riding through the sky. Like, it's that part of the boss fight is not like crazy hard, but it is one of the coolest things that you've seen on a Nintendo Switch game. So really fantastic. The ending of that game was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. My argument for buying Super Mario Wonder, even though I haven't finished and I'm not near finishing Tears of the Kingdom, is that that's a snack of novelty, like a hit of energy and novelty, and it's short, and I can just get a thing that I will have never seen before at every level. And I was like, cool, but maybe finish the game you're playing, which is as everybody who
It's kind of a
listens to this
motto for our
podcast-
show, right?
Yeah. Finish the game you're
Cool,
playing.
but finish the game you're playing.
Yeah. We'll see. I did put it on my Christmas list, so we'll see if it just magically appears in under the tree in a month. And then I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
That's how Christmas works. Ask for the things you're not supposed to have.
Or just buy something for yourself, wrap it, put it under the tree, and say Santa brought it. And if someone says, why did you buy this for yourself? You say, you don't believe in the magic of Christmas, you monster.
Santa.
Yeah. Well, I think now is a good time for us to do a little outro, and then we'll do like a little.
It's going to be tidy, folks. Yeah.
Like a 3-minute spoiler break. So be prepared for this to be a very short one. But before we do our spoilers for the end of Highland Song, thank you so much, listeners, for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm. From there, you can find all of the various links and buttons to, for example, go review our show on the various podcast platforms to which you have access. That would be a great thing to do. Or you can go to patreon.com/theshortgame, also linked on shortgame.fm. And from there, you can support the show with your hard-earned currency. And the lowest tier is just $3 a month. If you do $3 a month into the Patreon, then you'll get instant access to our Discord, as well as slightly early access to episodes, which I know not the hugest exciting advancement, but hey, maybe you'd prefer to listen to your episodes on Saturdays instead of Mondays. We usually hit that. Give it a try. And you can, of course, then in our Discord, chat with us about the games that you're playing. That's a greatest place to give us suggestions for games to cover on the show. It's also a great place for our listeners to give suggestions to each other. We got a really nice couple of channels in there where folks are suggesting games or talking about the games that they're playing. And if you like the kinds of games that we do, you probably will have a good time in the Discord talking about those kinds of games with other listeners of the show and us, of course. So we really value that community. It's a big help and a big part of how we produce the podcast now. So we'd really love to have you there. Again, shortgame.fm or patreon.com/theshortgame. And you can find me on the internet at Raygan, RAYGAN.me, which has links to all of my various socials, including Mastodon. I'm Raygan at bird.rodeo. Laura, where can people find you?
And you can find me, Laura J. Nash, at bird.rodeo. I'm also on Blue Sky.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me at Shane at bird.rodeo on the Mastodon.
And here it is, listeners, your spoiler break. Laura, we're already running long. We'll just make it real quick, but I really want to hear about the end of the game.
Yes.
Laura, will you tell me what I missed?
So I don't know how much of the story about her family you got.
Not a ton. So tell me what you got.
Not gonna miss the mom, not connected to the mom, no real relation to the mom. Does have feelings for her brother. You know, he's a little toad, but he's my little toad. As you're going through, you're finding these kind of maps and things that are like clearly from a couple. You find like more written on stuff. Like you go to a cottage and you're like, wait, was this the cottage I was born in? Like you're finding all this weird stuff on the way. Like the closer you get to the sea, the more artifacts of you you're finding. You get to the cottage, your uncle's like, and you're also getting more mythology about like Hamish. Is he crazy? He keeps talking about Selkies. Like he believes in all of this lore. Like Hamish really believes like the lore is real. So you get to the cottage and Hamish is like, oh, well, in my case, you arrive at 7 p.m. and he's like, you almost missed it. But I didn't. And you go out and he's like, you see her out there and there's a bunch of seals. They look kind of goofy. I will say the seals look goofy. Mm-hmm. And she's like, one of them's looking at you. She knows you're here. Go down to see her. And you're like, why would I go see a seal? And he's like, it's your mother, a Selkie. And
like your real mom? So who's the mom that you left behind?
So you're like, wait, what? My real mom? And she's like, yeah, she's a Selkie. Like that's why you've been raised. And you're like, wait, and then based on the stuff, again, I had seen stuff on the trip. So I was like, wait, are you my dad?
Mm.
And he's like, yes. And then you can choose to dive into the water and join your mother at the end of the game if you want, or you can stay up. I mean, I guess you could stay at the cabin. I chose to dive in. The diving animation is also a little goofy. I will say I was in for the story, but the animations were a little like, I'm going to go dive in after the seal. Like, little silly. But I had seen enough stuff on the trip for me to be like, yes, this ending makes sense. But I could super see a situation. I'm wondering if the ending is the same for everybody if you get through by Beltane. Because I could super see a situation where you show up and you're like, I never heard about Selkies. I didn't see any of this stuff about me being bored in a cabin to a woman who wasn't you. I didn't hear the weird stuff about a woman and you, like, in Moira. Like, if you hadn't heard all of that stuff, which I think was generated by stuff or like cabins or places I found, I don't know if that is true for everybody. Because it would be really weird if you showed up at the cabin and was like, your mom's a Selkie, I'm your dad. And you're like, cool, 2 discoveries.
I'm kind of
makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm very curious about what's going to happen if I continue my game and because I've blown way past Beltane.
It might be like she missed her. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to keep the Selkie ending for everybody, or if that was just because I had seen a bunch of Selkie stuff on the way.
I don't know how good of an ending it'll be if you roll up to the thing. Well, you missed your mum. She was a Selkie. What? Yeah, sorry, missed it. Bye.
Yep, I'm your dad. Bye.
Yeah.
You want to go inside? What accent is that? That is definitely not Scottish.
No. Well, I don't know. Maybe
late.
Maybe I'll take some time and see if I can slug on through. I am curious.
If you aren't enjoying it, just take a long break. Don't slug on through.
Try again later.
In a year.
Yeah.
I'll come back to it.
Go watch Song of the Sea for your Selkie.
I was just thinking this is this is very on the I loved Song of the Sea. Great story about Selkies. Great animation. Like, yeah, sure. I was kind of expecting some Selkie stuff with this, given that the place it's located and the
Selkies are kind of a weird ass piece of mythology, right?
Yeah.
Seal women.
You steal their skins, and you get to keep them.
It's a weird story.
On that note,
by some lonely men who. All right. Well, time to go. Listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of the Short Game.
Love an outro like that. Please keep that.
It's been a real one
for every outro.
It's been a real one. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, once again for joining us on this episode of the Short Game.